Good morning from Mission Control in Houston at the Johnson Space Center and the International Space Station Flight Control Room as we prepare for the homecoming of 3 crew members who have spent time aboard the International Space Station. Here in the Flight Control Room, the Orbit 1 team of flight controllers has been on console for the past several hours and are preparing for the final phase of the return to Earth of NASA astronaut Nick Hague, Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexey Ovchinin, and visiting astronaut Hazzaa Ali Almansoori of the United Arab Emirates. That trio of crew members departed the International Space Station about 2 hours ago at 2:37 a.m. Central Time, 3:37 a.m. Eastern Time, and now have backed away to a position almost 62 miles away from the International Space Station, standing by for the deorbit burn, the retrograde burn of the Soyuz engine that will slow their velocity down by about 128 meters per second, allowing them to drop out of orbit for their return back to Earth and a parachute-assisted landing on the south-central steppe of Kazakhstan, about 92 miles to the southeast of the town of Zhezkazgan. That deorbit burn is scheduled just under 35 minutes from now. A few minutes ago, the crew on board the Soyuz MS-12, Hague, Ovchinin, and Almansoori, reported back to Russian flight controllers at the Russian Mission Control Center in Korolyov on the outskirts of Moscow that they were feeling well. Everything is all set aboard the Soyuz, all of their systems in excellent shape in advance of the deorbit burn that will begin that slide back into the Earth's atmosphere and a landing in Kazakhstan to wrap up their mission. Here in the Space Station Flight Control Room here at the Johnson Space Center in Mission Control, again the Orbit 1 team of flight controllers on console under the direction of Flight Director Rebecca Wingfield at this hour. She has been talking to the crew on board the International Space Station, the newly comprised Expedition 61 crew, joined on console by spacecraft communicator Adam Springer in the dark shirt. To his right is veteran astronaut Joe Acaba, a Soyuz systems expert who has flown to the International Space Station for long-duration missions, as well as on the Space Shuttle and Space Shuttle assembly flights in his own right. He is here for a second set of eyes on Soyuz systems for Hague, Ovchinin, and Almansoori's return to Earth. Nick Hague and Alexey Ovchinin are returning to Earth here with landing scheduled an hour and 27 minutes from now to wrap up 203 days on board the International Space Station and in orbit since their launch back on March 15th, Kazakhstan time, March 14th, U.S. time, a mission that will wrap up soon, completing 3,248 orbits of the Earth, a mission that has spanned 86.1 million statute miles. Almansoori, a visiting astronaut under an intergovernmental agreement between the United Arab Emirates and Roscosmos, is completing 8 days in space, 128 orbits of the Earth, a mission that has spanned 3.3 million miles. Behind on the International Space Station, the 6-person crew under the direction of the newly named commander Luca Parmitano, who took over command of the station early Wednesday morning from Alexey Ovchinin. Parmitano from the European Space Agency, the 3rd European to command the International Space Station, joined by NASA's Drew Morgan, Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Skvortsov, Alex Kropotchka, who launched along with Jessica Meir and Almansoori just last week from the Baikonur Cosmodrome, and Christina Cook, who launched with Hague and Ovchinin back in March and who now is in the midst of a long-duration mission on the station that will last through February 6th of next year, when she returns to Earth after 328 days in space. About 5 hours ago in the Rosviet module of the International Space Station, the departing crew of Ovchinin, Hague, and Almansoori had an opportunity to say farewell to their 6 colleagues. They gathered at the hatchway to the Soyuz MS-12 spacecraft for a final series of photos. They waved goodbye to their colleagues and floated through the hatchway into the descent module of the Soyuz MS-12. One final group shot there of Hague on the left, of Ovchinin in the middle, and Almansoori on the right, as they bid farewell to their crewmates and boarded the Soyuz MS-12, where they closed the hatch, conducted leak checks on their side of the Soyuz station interface, and began to suit up in their Russian Sokol launch and entry suits as they checked out their communication systems and then depressurized the vestibule, the small passageway between the Soyuz and the Rosviet module, in preparation for their undocking. The hatch closing of the Soyuz hatch took place at 11:20 p.m. Central Time on Wednesday night, 12:20 a.m. Eastern Time on Thursday morning, just several hours ago. And again, you see the crew in this replay floating through the hatchway into the descent module of the Soyuz, which is a three-section spacecraft. The center section is the descent module, where the crew is strapped into their seats, with Ovchinin in the center seat as the Soyuz commander, flanked to his left by board engineer number 1, who is Nick Hague, the NASA astronaut, and to his right by Hazzaa Ali Almansoori of the United Arab Emirates, the visiting astronaut, who is board engineer number 2 for today's entry and landing back to Earth. You'll see coming into view here in a moment, there's Alexander Skvortsov, who watched the hatch close to the Soyuz spacecraft, and then in turn closed the hatch on the ISS or Rosviet side of the docking interface. There went the Soyuz hatch. Again, this occurring at 11:20 p.m. Central Time last night, followed by the closing of the Rosviet hatch. The crew donned their launch and entry suits, conducted leak checks to their suits as well as to the docking interface. Everything checked out in great shape, setting the stage for the vehicle's undocking from the International Space Station. In this replay of the undocking itself, that occurred at 2:37 and 30 seconds a.m. Central Time, 3:37 a.m. Eastern Time. Hooks were driven open that held the Soyuz in place to the Rosviet module. Springs on both sides of the docking interface pushed off against one another, allowing physical separation of the Soyuz from the Rosviet module to which it had been attached since March 15th. At the moment of undocking, Expedition 61 formally began aboard the International Space Station under the command of Luca Parmitano of the European Space Agency. The undocking occurring over southeast Mongolia at an altitude of 260 statute miles. 3 minutes after undocking, the Soyuz engine fired for 8 seconds in a separation burn to increase the opening rate between the Soyuz and the station, an opening rate that now has the Soyuz vehicle, the MS-12 spacecraft, and its 3 occupants some 62 miles away from the International Space Station. During this separation phase of the activities, Ovchinin radioed back to Alexander Skvortsov on board the International Space Station that it was great working with you. We will miss you guys, as he said, but they wished each other good luck for the station crew on its ongoing mission, and to the Soyuz crew for a soft landing on the steppe of Kazakhstan. Countdown clocks here in Mission Control counting down to the time of the deorbit burn about 25.5 minutes from now. This will be a 4-minute, 42-second retrograde burn and engine firing that will slow the Soyuz down by 128 meters per second, allowing it to drop out of orbit for its return to Earth. Once the deorbit burn is complete, a few minutes later, the vehicle will pyrotechnically command a separation of the three sections. The descent module that you're seeing there is the only section that survives the heat of reentry with the crew on board, its heat shield repelling that heat. The vehicle, as it reaches toward the landing site, will deploy its parachutes in a sequential fashion some 15 minutes before landing. Finally, first a drogue chute is deployed, followed by pilot parachutes, followed by a main parachute. We're going to talk more about this activity in a second. And the braking maneuver and the action will result in a soft landing engine firing just a couple of seconds off the ground, and the crew will be home with landing scheduled just a few seconds before 6 a.m. Central Time, 7 a.m. Eastern Time, which will be 5 a.m. at the landing site in Kazakhstan. The parachute deployment sequence that you saw in that animation is triggered by a barometric pressure sensor at an altitude of 41,000 feet. At that point, the main parachute cover is jettisoned by pyros and springs, pulling out two pilot chutes, which in turn pulls out the drogue chute, and that in turn pulls out the main chute. That entire sequence takes about 20 seconds. At an altitude of just over 21,000 feet, a second barometric pressure sensor starts a timer that triggers the rest of the remaining events in the landing sequence. With visibility expected to be nearly perfect at the landing site for this late afternoon landing in Kazakhstan, the weather forecast calls for clear skies, temperatures in the low to mid 60s. Hopefully we will get a great view of the vehicle under the chutes after that chute deployment sequence is complete. Now, what you're likely to see, assuming we have live television of the Soyuz descending under the chutes, at an altitude of some 18,000 feet, commands are issued to jettison the heat shield, inhibit the entry control thrusters, and to open valves to vent all the hydrogen peroxide fuel for the entry control thrusters and the oxygen in the life support system tank. The white vapor you will see venting from the Soyuz, assuming we have live TV of that activity, is a combination of hydrogen peroxide and oxygen escaping into the atmosphere. The purpose of this is to safe the Soyuz spacecraft for landing so that no hazardous gases remain in the vehicle's tanks when the soft landing engines fire a few seconds before the Soyuz touches down. By doing this, the search and recovery forces personnel and RSC Energia technicians who approach the Soyuz vehicle immediately after touchdown can do so in a safe manner. The search and recovery forces constituting the Rosaviatsa Civil Air Patrol recovery team, along with a team of NASA personnel led by Tricia Mack, the Director of Human Spaceflight Programs in Russia, and Kenny Todd, who's the ISS manager, the program manager for integration and operations. They are leading the team of NASA personnel, which also includes NASA Public Affairs Officer Gary Jordan and the NASA chief photographer out of NASA headquarters, Bill Ingalls. They are all at the Zhezkazgan airport. They flew 2 hours on an Antonov 26 fixed-wing aircraft from the staging city of Karaganda, Kazakhstan, down to Zhezkazgan. They're at the airfield in Zhezkazgan, and around the time of the deorbit burn that's coming up, they should be on board their respective helicopters, departing Zhezkazgan one by one. There are about a dozen prime helicopters that will be flying 35 minutes from Zhezkazgan to the vicinity of the landing site, and will arrive in a circular pattern, a racetrack pattern around the landing zone, awaiting the arrival of the Soyuz under its main parachute. The landing site is some 92 statute miles to the southeast of Zhezkazgan, which is basically the same area that Soyuz vehicles land in for each landing. The updated landing coordinates call for the touchdown to be at 47.20 degrees north latitude, 69.35 degrees east longitude. The Russian search and recovery forces are on station, reporting that they are ready for the arrival of the Soyuz vehicle. There's a large Antonov aircraft that is in the vicinity of the landing zone that operates as a flying command and control center, relaying conversations between the Soyuz spacecraft back to Russian mission control personnel there, as you see in this live view from a balcony camera of the Russian mission control center in Korolyov. That Antonov Command Control Center aircraft will also relay data back from the Soyuz spacecraft so that all of its operations and all of its telemetry can be relayed to the Russian flight control team in Korolyov for verification of its descent. One item of note to keep in mind as we complete the deorbit burn and for the Soyuz to enter into the Earth's atmosphere, around 5:25 a.m. Central Time, 6:25 a.m. Eastern Time, the Soyuz will be at a range of greater than 150 kilometers away from the International Space Station. That's at a point where VHF voice communications are expected to either become choppy or be lost altogether. That's due to the geometry of the Soyuz spacecraft entering the Earth's atmosphere in relation to antennas that relay VHF communications to the International Space Station and to ground personnel. Once the Soyuz approaches the landing site itself, communications will be restored through the Antonov fixed-wing aircraft. You'll be hearing a beacon signal, a beep, beep, beep from the Soyuz spacecraft, indicating its final approach just prior to the deployment of the parachutes some 15 minutes before touchdown. One other data point, again, the deorbit burn that is scheduled just 18 minutes from now.
The South America, Patagonica. It's a wonderful place. Yes, it's absolutely beautiful. Glaciers and yes, a lot of beautiful areas. Yes, that's correct.
Alexey Ovchinin through a Russian interpreter indicating that the Soyuz, which is now, along with the International Space Station, on a trajectory from northwest to southeast, will soon pass over the southern tip of South America, over the Andes Mountains, and that topography that he reported just a moment ago. The deorbit burn, which is less than about 17.5 minutes from now, is scheduled at 5:06 and 19 seconds a.m. Central Time, 6:06:19 Eastern Time, a 4-minute, 42-second retrograde maneuver, slowing the Soyuz down by 128 meters per second, enabling it to drop out of orbit for its descent back into the Earth's atmosphere. Just about 5 minutes after the deorbit burn is completed, the upper section of the Soyuz, called the orbital module, will be depressurized to vacuum. That sets the stage for the pyrotechnic separation of the three sections of the Soyuz spacecraft. That's the only other section during the flight of Soyuz that winds up being pressurized to enable the crew to have an opportunity to have more space for itself during free flight after launch to the station, or in this case, for the short period of time after an undocking from the station prior to the deorbit itself.
Одна минута.
1 minute. Yes, that's correct. 1 minute.
Бурла
Burlaki, there's less than 1 minute until the command IKV inhibit. This is Burlak 1. I confirm the time of the IKV inhibit is 12:51:00. Yes, that's correct.
This conversation, a final check between the Russian mission controllers that you see here in this view from the balcony camera in Korolyov and the crew on board Soyuz MS-12. Again, in the descent module, the center section strapped into their seats. In the center seat, Alexey Ovchinin, the Soyuz commander. His call sign is Burlak for his vehicle. That's the call sign that you will hear between the communications from Korolyov to the crew itself. To Ovchinin's left is Nick Hague, the NASA astronaut who Ovchinin launched with back on March 15th. Their second time launching together, their first launch attempt back on October 11th, 2018, resulting in the launch abort and a 19-minute suborbital flight that they landed safely from after a booster separation problem triggered the launch escape system, pulling their Soyuz vehicle at that time a year ago free from their booster. They were reassigned to the Soyuz MS-12 along with NASA astronaut Christina Koch. That trio launched from the Baikonur Cosmodrome on March 15th, Kazakhstan time, safely reaching orbit, safely reaching the International Space Station, and now they're in the home stretch of a 203-day mission. Christina Koch remaining on board for an extended duration mission with her colleagues who are now part of Expedition 61. Almansoori launched from the Baikonur Cosmodrome on the Soyuz MS-15 spacecraft last week, along with Jessica Meir and Alex Skripochka. His 8-day mission coming to an end under this intergovernmental agreement between the United Arab Emirates and Roscosmos.
Burlaki, the next time tag is maneuver at 12:58:19. We confirm. So the time is 12:58:19. The SKD minus 8 minutes in the next time tag. What about the cameras, Burlak? Are they working? Yes, they are working. Copy. Both cameras are shooting video. Copy. Great.
We're inside 12 minutes now until the deorbit burn that will begin the journey home for Nick Hague, Alexey Ovchinin, and Hazzaa Ali Almansoori. All Soyuz systems in excellent shape. The Russian mission control team in Korolyov at the ready, along with the search and recovery forces who are standing by, having boarded helicopters at the airfield in Zhezkazgan, which is about 92 miles to the northwest of the landing site in south-central Kazakhstan. The weather at the landing site just couldn't be better for a late afternoon touchdown on this early fall day. Just a few clouds reported, almost clear, pristine skies. Light winds, temperatures in the low 60s Fahrenheit. The touchdown, which is expected just a few seconds before 6 a.m. Central Time, 7 a.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Kazakhstan time, is taking place about an hour and 58 minutes before sunset. And the reports now from the airfield in Roscosmos indicate that the first of the search and recovery helicopters with NASA personnel on board are airborne now, heading towards the landing site.
Ten minutes till the ignition.
Just inside 10 minutes until the start of the deorbit burn, a 4-minute, 42-second engine firing. You will hear Ovchinin call out chamber pressure and duration of burn to the Russian flight controllers who are monitoring their telemetry in Korolyov.
Минута до метки ТСКД -8.
1 minute until time tag SKD time -8.
Twelve 50:22. Maneuver LED illumination time. Copy. Nick, please check T3 command. Send in T3 command. Copy. Command has been sent. I confirm S9 command.
Aboard the Soyuz MS-12 in the center seat of the descent module, Soyuz commander Alexey Ovchinin checking his systems, relaying data back to the Russian flight control team in Korolyov as we are approaching the 7-minute mark until the start of the deorbit burn.
And you should be at sunrise now. Please monitor via VSK periscope. No, we're still at sunset and just moving towards sunrise now. Nick, please send G3. I confirm GSO 1 and 2 combined GSO in attitude command. Copy.
6 minutes now until the start of the deorbit burn that will bring home Nick Hague, Alexey Ovchinin, and Hazzaa Ali Almansoori. Helicopters now airborne from the airfield in Jezkazgan for about a 35-minute flight to the landing site, where they will be deployed in a racetrack fashion, an oval-shaped fashion. The 12 prime helicopters, one by one, awaiting the arrival of the Soyuz MS-12 under its parachute. The Soyuz MS-12 and the International Space Station now crossing the southwest coast of South America, soon to begin a southwest to northeasterly track across the Atlantic towards the west coast of Africa.
Ignition. And please provide very detailed running commentary. And please provide data regarding the time and Delta V. This is Burlak 1, I copy all.
Coming up on the 3-minute mark until the deorbit burn, Alexey Ovchinin will be reporting duration of the burn as it continues for 4 minutes and 42 seconds. Delta velocity, meaning a change in velocity. The deorbit burn is designed to slow the Soyuz down by 128 meters per second in this braking maneuver that will enable it to drop out of orbit. He'll also be reporting chamber pressure as the fuel tanks are depleted.
Two minutes to Escadem.
This view from a camera on the International Space Station actually showing the Soyuz MS-12 at a distance of some 62 miles away from the International Space Station, as we are coming up on the 90-second mark until the start of the deorbit burn.
Moscow, this is Burlak 1. And visually, I can confirm the attitude. Attitude is fine, and I see the Earth limb. And GSO, combined GSO in attitude. Command is confirmed. Copy.
Russian flight controllers reporting that the Soyuz is in the proper attitude for the start of the deorbit burn 1 minute from now.
Stabilization mode setup is confirmed. SG indication confirmed. Copy. Copy. A1 is confirmed. SKD cover is open. Copy.
30 seconds away from the deorbit burn, Russian search and recovery helicopters with NASA personnel on board are airborne, heading for the landing site to the southeast of Zhezkazgan as we stand by for the start of the ignition of the Soyuz engine.
Copy.
Inside 10 seconds.
I
I confirm SKD main engine activation. Copy.
And the deorbit burn is underway.
For 15 seconds, we've completed 5.5 meters per second, and 0.5 is the acceleration value. Copy. 30 seconds, 12 meters, 0.44. This is the acceleration value. Copy. 45 seconds, delta V 19.2, acceleration 0.44. Copy.
1 minute into the burn, everything looking good.
1 minute, 26.1 meters per second, 0.44. This is the acceleration value. Credible parameters are nominal. Copy.
So far, so good. The change in velocity right on the money.
32.7 meters per second, 0.45. Credible parameters nominal. Copy. 1 minute 30 seconds, 39.3 meters per second, 0.44. This is the acceleration. Copy. 1 minute 45 seconds, 46 meters. Acceleration is at 0.45. Copy. 2 minutes, 53.1 meters per second. Acceleration is at 0.45. Copy. The duration 2 minutes, 15 seconds, 59.5 meters. Acceleration is at 0.45. Credible parameters are nominal. Copy.
Halfway through the burn, everything looking good.
2.5 minutes, 67 meters. Acceleration 0.45. Credible parameters are nominal. Copy. And we have passed the time tag. 3 minutes, 80.7 meters per second. Acceleration is at 0.46.
The Soyuz vehicle now committed to deorbit.
3 minutes, 15 seconds, 87 meters. Acceleration 0.46. Credible parameters are nominal. Copy. 3.5 minutes, 94.5 meters per second. Acceleration is at 0.46. Copy.
За 3:45.
3 minutes, 45 seconds.
Less than 1 minute to go for the deorbit burn, everything looking good.
0.47. Credible parameters are nominal. Copy. 4 minutes, burn duration of 4 minutes, 8.8 meters per second, acceleration is 0.47. 4 minutes 15 seconds, 14.3 meters per second, acceleration 0.47. Cadil parameters are nominal. Copy.
About 20 seconds to go, standing by for engine shutdown.
4.5 minutes, 1 to 1.9 meters per second, acceleration is 0.47. Standing by for cutoff command. GK command has been executed at 13:11:03. Copy.
And the deorbit burn is complete and nominal. A perfect deorbit burn. Nick Hague and Alexey Ovchinin heading home, completing an odyssey that began almost a year ago with a launch aboard from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan, culminating with a 203-day mission on board the orbital outpost at the International Space Station. Hazzaa Ali Almansoori completing a pathfinding mission for the United Arab Emirates. Touchdown in Kazakhstan on a desolate steppe to the southeast of the town of Zhezkazgan, now 48 minutes from now.
What about SA pressure? The SA pressure is stable at 769. Copy. 769. We have switched to page 56. Copy. No later than 13:28:12. Helmets will be sealed and KSS rescue aid system will be activated. Yes, that's affirmative.
Continuing to receive views from truss cameras on the International Space Station of the Soyuz MS-12. The deorbit burn was perfectly normal. The crew heading home, soon to drop out of orbit for its high-speed entry back into the Earth's atmosphere. The upper portion of the vehicle, the orbital module, that's the bulbous section at the very top of the Soyuz, has been depressurized, setting the stage for the pyrotechnic separation of the three sections of the Soyuz coming up at 5:34 a.m. Central Time.
Your harness belt. Copy. Not right now, but once you start feeling the G-load.
At the landing site, preparations are underway for the arrival of the Soyuz MS-12 and the three crew members. There are a dozen Russian Mi-8 helicopters, part of the Rosaviatsa search and recovery forces with NASA personnel on board that are airborne, having taken off several minutes ago from the airfield in Zhezkazgan for the landing site, some 92 miles to the southeast of Zhezkazgan. And as mentioned earlier, an Antonov fixed-wing aircraft will be serving as a flying command and control vehicle, basically a command and control relay center that will enable voice and telemetry from the Soyuz to be relayed to the Russian flight control team that you see there in the Russian flight control room in Korolyov.
Hazzaa, опять будем над Эмиратами пролетать.
Hazzaa, we're going to fly over the Emirates again. That's right.
Alexey Ovchinin on board the Soyuz telling Hazzaa Ali Almansoori of the United Arab Emirates, who's seated to his right as board engineer number 2, that the Soyuz will be flying almost directly over the United Arab Emirates on this final path that will take the Soyuz to its landing site in Kazakhstan. Touchdown expected about 42 minutes from now. Module separation about 17 minutes from now. This is Mission Control Houston. Just to recap, the Soyuz MS-12 is in the process of departing from its orbit, having completed a 4-minute, 42-second deorbit burn, a retrograde firing of its main engine to slow its velocity down to the point where the tug of Earth's gravity will pull it back into the Earth's atmosphere. Touchdown is expected just under 40 minutes from now at a landing site to the southeast of Zhezkazgan on a remote steppe, a desolate area of Kazakhstan, where Soyuz vehicles will typically land these days. The Russian search and recovery forces are fanned out across the area. Russian Mi-8 helicopters are airborne, headed for the landing site. Russian personnel some of which are already in the vicinity of the landing site, poised for the arrival of the Soyuz vehicle under its main parachute, and the touchdown and the end of this mission for Alexey Ovchinin, Nick Hague, and Hazzaa Ali Almansoori. Expedition 61 underway aboard the International Space Station under the command of European Space Agency astronaut Luca Parmitano, joined by Russian cosmonauts Alexander Skvortsov and Alex Skripochka, and NASA astronauts Drew Morgan, Jessica Meir, and Christina Cook. This is about the point where the Soyuz is too far away from the International Space Station for the geometry of antennas on the vehicles to maintain VHF voice communications. This is totally expected and is common for a Soyuz descent, where communications may be lost altogether, or at very best would become choppy until it approaches the landing site and reestablishes communications through the Antonov command and control flying aircraft. This is Mission Control Houston. Once again, the Soyuz MS-12 is about to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere following its deorbit burn to enable it to drop out of orbit for its high-speed return back to Earth. The next major event is the pyrotechnic separation of the three sections of the Soyuz, scheduled at 5:34 a.m. Central Time. That will be followed just 4 minutes later by the vehicle entering into the plasma regime, in which temperatures around the Soyuz will build to about 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit. Its heat shield ablating and repelling that buildup of plasma around the vehicle. As we've mentioned several times before, but it's worth mentioning again, this is the point at which communications are either choppy or lost altogether because of the distance of the Soyuz from the International Space Station, where communications antennas no longer can relay voice or telemetry for a period of time. This plasma regime that will begin about 5:38 a.m. Central Time will last for about 5 minutes before the Soyuz.
Remaining until separation. Moscow did not copy your last. Could you please repeat your last? 10 minutes remaining until separation. Copy and confirm.
And there we have communications again with the Soyuz as Alexey Ovchinin looks at the timers on his telemetry display in the Soyuz in the descent module. About 10 minutes away from module separation, he confirmed. Once the vehicle exits the plasma regime at about 5:43 a.m. Central Time, we at that point will be about 2 minutes away from the command to open up parachutes.
6 minutes to module separation. You have to put KSS rescue aids in active mode and standby mode, and please depress push to talk buttons and transmit button. And please provide running commentary by pressing push to talk button without holding it down. So the helmets now? Yes. Okay, it's sealed. That's for FE1. This is Hazzaa. My helmet is also closed. Copy. Okay.
This is Mission Control Houston, some 31 minutes away from the expected touchdown of the Soyuz MS-12 on the south-central steppe of Kazakhstan.
Moscow, this is Burlak 1. We copy you loud and clear. The helmets are closed. The KSS rescue aids are activated, and the push-to-talk button is released. And we are standing by for the time 13:31:12. It's separation time minus 3 minutes. Copy. Burlaki, around 13:43. There might be VHF pass com via our stations, and after the plasma re-entry, after the plasma exit at 13:43. How copy? 13:43. We might have com at this time. That's affirmed.
Bonus communications between the Russian flight controllers in Korolyov and Alexey Ovchinin on board the Soyuz MS-12. We're about 4 minutes away from the anticipated pyrotechnic separation of the three sections of the Soyuz vehicle.
Via VSK, what is your evaluation? It's complicated. The angle is 180 and 0. Copy.
Less than 3 minutes away from the anticipated separation of the three sections of the Soyuz vehicle. That will leave the descent module with the crew strapped in their seats on board, with the heat shield facing the direction of travel to repel temperatures that will build up shortly to about 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit as they enter into the so-called plasma regime.
Burlaki, would you please confirm that the separation program has started? Yes, we confirm, and we also have controlled descent. Copy. Burlaki, 1 minute until separation.
Just over 26 minutes until landing. Everything continuing to go by the book as we stand by for confirmation of module separation.
30 seconds until separation. Burlaki, this is Moscow. Inaudible. 10 seconds until separation.
Russian flight controllers confirming a good module separation right on time, 25 minutes until touchdown. All the milestones for the Soyuz's entry back to Earth continuing to tick off in trip hammer fashion, everything looking good. Vehicle systems reported to be in excellent shape.
Burlaki, 2 minutes until the re-entry.
The continuing communications with the crew, which we received in serendipitous fashion, about to be lost as they enter into the plasma regime, where the buildup of heat around the vehicle likely will prevent communications for several minutes until they exit that period of the entry prior to the command to deploy the parachutes. The chute deployment sequence, 2 pilot parachutes are first deployed, the second of which extracts the drogue chute. The drogue chute, once it is released, it measures 24 square meters, slowing the Soyuz down from a descent rate of 230 meters per second to just 80 meters per second. That in turn will release the main parachute covering an area of 1,000 meters. It's a huge parachute, slowing the Soyuz to a descent rate of 7.2 meters per second. The harnesses attached with the Soyuz first allow the Soyuz to descend at an angle of about 30 degrees to expel residual heat from its journey through the plasma regime, then shifts the Soyuz to a straight vertical descent to enable the altimeter on the heat shield that will be jettisoned to pick up rate of descent and distance to the ground for the computers to have its information updated for the soft landing engines to be fired.
Inaudible.
The Soyuz now in the plasma regime. Once again, this is where a controlled entry guidance begins, also the time in which the temperature around the Soyuz builds, with the heat being ablated by the heat shield at the bottom of the spacecraft. The descent module, Alexey Ovchinin, the Soyuz commander, in the center seat, flanked to his left by NASA astronaut Nick Hague, to his right by Hazzaa Ali Almansoori, the visiting astronaut from the United Arab Emirates. The Russian Mi-8 helicopters, part of the search and recovery forces, now in the vicinity of the landing site, beginning a pattern of an oval-shaped circular pattern of flight around the expected trajectory of the Soyuz under its main parachute once it's deployed. The Soyuz continues to barrel its way toward the landing site. We are about 4 minutes away from the expected deployment of the parachutes. "17 minutes until touchdown. Again, we are in a period of a loss of communications with the Soyuz vehicle. Once it exits the plasma regime, communications should be restored through the Antonov fixed-wing aircraft that's operating as a flying command and control center, relaying information, data, and voice back to the Russian mission control team in Korolyov. You see that team gathered at their consoles from this balcony camera.
How do you copy us? G-load 428. The integral is plus 13 over the curve. Copy, Burlaki. So what is the miss? 1 second. And what about ESA pressure? 770. How are you feeling, guys? We are feeling well. Copy.
Communications restored with the Soyuz MS-12 almost to the second, and again that familiar beacon that's sending signals to the search and recovery forces at the landing site.
What was maximum G-load? 4.3. Copy. The maximum G-load was 4.3. We confirm. Standing by for the OSP deploy, parachute deploy. So we are entering the atmosphere. We can feel that.
That call from Alexey Ovchinin aboard the Soyuz MS-12 indicating that the crew is now feeling the tug of gravity. For Ovchinin and Nick Hague, their first sensation of gravity in 203 days. Soyuz heading toward the landing site under controlled entry. The crew reported pulling a maximum of 4.5 Gs.
Unintelligible.
And there's our first view of the Soyuz MS-12 under its main parachute. The venting that you're seeing, valves have been opened to vent hydrogen peroxide fuel for the entry control thrusters and oxygen in the life support system tank. This is a combination of hydrogen peroxide and oxygen escaping into the atmosphere to safe the Soyuz spacecraft for landing so that no hazardous gases remain in the vehicle's tanks when the soft landing engines fire a few seconds before touchdown. This is a normal occurrence at an altitude of some 18,000 feet. A cloudless day over south-central Kazakhstan to greet Nick Hague, Alexey Ovchinin, and Hazzaa Ali Almansoori. Russian Mi-8 helicopters, part of the Rosaviatsa search and recovery forces, are also circling the area around the Soyuz spacecraft. A good view of the Soyuz again, and there's the jettisoning of the heat shield. This exposes the altimeter at the bottom of the Soyuz descent module to calculate rate of descent and distance from the ground to update the Soyuz's computers for the firing of the soft landing engines just a couple of seconds before touchdown. Inside 10 minutes until touchdown, a great view of the Soyuz MS-12 from cameras at the landing site about 92 miles to the southeast of the town of Roscosmos. Everything has proceeded in perfect fashion for Hague, Ovchinin, and Almansoori, who are just minutes away from completing their respective missions.
Unintelligible.
About 8 minutes until touchdown, everything proceeding normally. The crew reporting it is in good shape. All of the events have unfolded in perfect fashion so far. Less than 6 minutes until touchdown. Everything is in great shape as you continue to watch the Soyuz descend under its main parachute, heading for the landing site in south central Kazakhstan, where the search and recovery forces are standing by to approach the vehicle after touchdown. They'll safe the vehicle and then begin the process of extracting the crew. The search and recovery forces have established communications with the crew on board the Soyuz MS-12, and they report they are feeling well. Two and a half minutes till touchdown. You're watching the methodical descent of the Soyuz MS-12 under its main parachute on a cloudless day in south central Kazakhstan. Temperatures around 62 degrees Fahrenheit at the landing site.
Unintelligible.
Just a few minutes away from the end of the mission for Hague, Ovchinin, and Almansoori. Hague and Ovchinin wrapping up a journey of 86.1 million miles. Almansoori wrapping up a 3.3 million mile mission over 8 days. And you can see one of the Russian Mi-8 helicopters, so we are approaching the moment of touchdown. Touchdown, right on the money. At 5:59 a.m. Central Time, 6:59 a.m. Eastern Time, 4:59 p.m. at the landing site. The soft landing engines having fired, the main parachute now reefing. Nick Hague, Alexey Ovchinin, and Hazzaa Ali Almansoori are home. Russian Mi-8 helicopters circling in the vicinity. They'll be landing in sequential fashion. A dozen prime helicopters at the landing site. It appeared to be a bullseye touchdown for the crew members on board the Soyuz MS-12. Again, touchdown at 5:59 a.m. Central Time, 6:59 a.m. Eastern Time. To recap, the Soyuz MS-12 is back on Earth with its crew of Nick Hague, Alexey Ovchinin, and Hazzaa Ali Almansoori. Hague and Ovchinin wrapping up 203 days in space and aboard the International Space Station. Mansoori's 8-day mission at an end for the United Arab Emirates. Russian search and recovery helicopters are landing now in sequential fashion in the vicinity of the spacecraft. The first team of technical specialists will be safing the spacecraft and beginning the process of extracting the crew. This is Mission Control Houston. This view of the flight control room at the Russian Mission Control Center in Korolyov outside of Moscow. The live television views that you've been enjoying watching the Soyuz MS-12 descend to its landing under its main parachute will be regaining a television view once the all-terrain vehicles that house the television equipment and the uplink satellite dish reposition themselves right at the capsule. So we should be getting that TV back shortly. A bullseye touchdown on time for Soyuz MS-12 in Hague, Ovchinin, and Almansoori at 5:59 a.m. Central Time, 6:59 a.m. Eastern Time, 4:59 p.m. at the landing site in Kazakhstan, about an hour and 58 minutes prior to sunset. Russian Mi-8 helicopters, part of the search and recovery forces, and all-terrain vehicles at the landing site are making their way towards the Soyuz spacecraft to begin the process of safing the vehicle and extracting the crew. All of the events from hatch closure to undocking to the deorbit burn and all of the entry activities per the timeline went off without a hitch. It was a perfectly nominal entry and landing for Hague, Ovchinin, and Almansoori. We are waiting to regain live television from the landing site where the Soyuz MS-12 touched down about 10 minutes ago. This is Mission Control Houston. The search and recovery forces now reporting that the Soyuz vehicle landed on its side. The RSC Energia personnel on the first couple of helicopters are on the scene and report that the crew is feeling well. This is Mission Control Houston, back with live video from the landing site. A look at Alexey Ovchinin. There is Hazzaa Ali Almansoori, the crew having been quickly extracted from the Soyuz vehicle that landed on its side 16 minutes ago at 5:59 a.m. Central Time, 6:59 a.m. Eastern Time. This is Mission Control Houston. All three crew members are now out of the Soyuz spacecraft in their chairs to get their land legs back for a short period of time before they're carried into the medical tent. On the scene is NASA Public Affairs Officer Gary Jordan. Gary, if you can hear me, give us a look-see at what's happening at the landing site.
Rob, it's a beautiful day out here at the landing site. Perfectly clear skies and sort of a brisk wind happening right now. But all the otherwise, a very good temperature for the crew. Now just coming out of the capsule, seated right in front for the first time, breathing fresh air from the Earth in 203 days. I arrived just after Hazzaa Ali Almansoori was extracted. As you mentioned, they were extracted very quickly after the Soyuz did land. As you can see now, positioned on its side, and the crew members were extracted from there. Lots of personnel out here, as you can probably see. Everyone gathering to see the crew members who are now able to talk to their families. But a lot of excitement here that's surrounding the three crew members completing their journey after 203 days, coming back safe and sound here in the steppes of Kazakhstan on their Soyuz MS-12.
Gary, we are seeing Alexey Ovchinin at the moment. Give us a timeline, if you will, of activities from this point until the crew begins its return to Karaganda.
Well, it won't be very long after they are done talking to their families. You can see them positioned in seats right in front of the capsule. Very shortly from this moment, they'll be carried over to a medical tent, which, as you're looking at the crew members, is to the right. I would say probably about 50 yards to the right, so relatively close compared to some of the times I've seen the tent in the past. Once they're carried over to the medical tent, they'll be examined for their health and undergo a series of tests. Nick Hague and Hazzaa Ali Almansoori will undergo tests called standard measures, which are a subset of some of the field tests that we've seen before to test the astronauts' performance immediately after landing and getting adjusted back to Earth's gravity. Alexey Ovchinin will undergo the full field test, which is a longer series of tests, and that will carry them for at least more than an hour, if not more. The sun should be setting just around the time that those field tests are wrapped up and the tent is deconstructed, and some of the last helicopters will fly over to Karaganda. At the Karaganda airport, we'll have a short ceremony to celebrate the three crew members coming home now, and they'll be presented with gifts from there.
Commander is first.
Gary, it seemed as if the extraction of the crew, we did not see them extracted in real time, but it seemed like it went very quickly.
We encountered the same thing. We were able to actually visualize some portion of the landing. We were probably one of the middle helicopters to land. There was about probably 6 helicopters that had landed before us. But by the time we got down, Nick Hague and Alexey Ovchinin have both been extracted, and Hazzaa Ali Almansoori was extracted shortly thereafter. But you're right, they were extracted in a relatively quick time frame, and now it seems like they're already positioning themselves to carry the crew members over to the medical tent and proceed with some of those tests, including the standard measures test from the Human Research Program, as well as the field test.
And we've gotten a view of NASA astronaut Nick Hague seated to the left of Alexey Ovchinin, the same configuration that they were seated in for entry and landing. Pat Forrester, NASA's chief astronaut, is right by Nick's side. As usual, for all three crew members, medical personnel providing initial attention to the three crew members, but none of them looking worse for wear. So how long now before you expect the crew members and yourself, frankly, to be airborne back to Karaganda, Gary?
Well, the crew themselves, as I mentioned, some of those standard measures tests are just a shorter series of tests that should be wrapped up in about under an hour. But even now, you can see Alexey Ovchinin actually being carried to the medical tent, again, about 50 yards to the right of the crew members. He'll be the first. Nick Hague following shortly behind Alexey Ovchinin, and Hazzaa Ali Almansoori will take up the rear. Once those tests begin, those tests should wrap up in just under an hour. The field test itself for Alexey Ovchinin will be a little bit longer of a test, but it won't be long until after those tests completed that the flight back to Karaganda, which should just be a little under 3 hours, will proceed shortly after that.
Gary, it looks like everything is proceeding by the book, as was all of the entry milestones for this crew back home safely on Earth. We thank you for your reports from the landing site, and have a safe trip back to Karaganda and back to Houston.
Thank you, Rob, and as always, it's a pleasure to be part of these activities. You see people from all over the world come together to make this a possibility, and it really takes a team to make it a reality. Appreciate it.
Gary Jordan, NASA Public Affairs Officer at the landing site, as you see Hazzaa Ali Almansoori being carried by fellow personnel from the United Arab Emirates Space Agency. Almansoori, the first Emirati citizen to fly in space, now entering the medical tent where he, Hague, and Ovchinin will undergo medical tests, get out of their Russian Sokol launch and entry suits into more comfortable flight clothing. Once that all is completed, they will board individual helicopters for a 2-hour flight from the landing site back to Karaganda, the staging city, which is to the northeast of the landing site. The crew will split up at that point with Ovchinin and Almansoori flying back in a Gagarin Cosmonaut Training Center aircraft to Star City, Russia, their training base outside of Moscow. Nick Hague will board a NASA Gulfstream jet for the flight back to Houston. And back in the International Space Station Flight Control Room here at the Johnson Space Center in Houston at Mission Control. We have been with you throughout the course of the night with the safe return of the 3 crew members from the International Space Station, astronaut Nick Hague, NASA astronaut, along with Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexey Ovchinin, and visiting astronaut Hazzaa Ali Almansoori from the United Arab Emirates, back home safely, having landed at 5:59 a.m. Central Time, 6:59 a.m. Eastern Time. The Soyuz MS-12 had a perfect entry back to Earth. All of the undocking and entry milestones were achieved without any issues whatsoever. The vehicle landed on its side at the landing site, almost a bullseye touchdown, 92 miles to the southeast of the town of Kazakhstan. The crew was quickly extracted, the vehicle landing on its side, but the search and recovery personnel got to the vehicle very quickly, extracted the crew, and they're now in the medical tent, receiving their initial medical tests, getting out of their Sokol launch and entry suits into more comfortable clothing for helicopter flights back to the staging city of Karaganda, Kazakhstan. So with that, we'll wrap up our coverage for this morning. The Soyuz MS-12 and its crew safely back on Earth, mission accomplished. Thank you for joining us throughout the night. This is Mission Control Houston.